Thanks for having me, Sister Fumi. Thank you, everyone, for having me. My name is Toks, as Sister Fumi has said, and I feel really blessed with the opportunity to share with you today. I mean, if anything happens with my internet, please somebody just wave or something, because I kept saying internet is unstable. But my business journey has been quite an interesting one, and I feel oftentimes I joke about this and I say my business exists to teach me lessons because that's what it seems to have done. But you know, the best part about when you are a believer, when you are a child of God, is that all things work together for your good. And if you can get yourself to believe in that fact, then it becomes the foundation for which you're growing and you're building and whatever it is you're doing. So I don't know how many people are here in business today, but my journey would apply to you if you are not in business, if you're in career, if you've got in the corporate world, or you are in employment rather, whatever it is. But I'm going to share my journey, and while I speak, I'm going to pull out a few lessons and principles that the Lord taught me to help me on my journey. And I hope that you will also glean from it and find your own lessons in there. So my journey in business started off when I was expecting, after I had had my third son. So I'd had my third son, and at the time I was working as a medical sales rep. I didn't grow up wanting to be a nursery interior designer or a businesswoman. I actually grew up expecting and wanting to be a doctor. Much of my childhood I spent looking at my father's medical books, and I assumed that that's what I was going to be, and I enjoyed it. But then I got married in my second year at university and began really focusing more on designing my home and decorating and buying wallpaper and painting. Then I was so broke that my husband and I, we were both students, and I would buy a big bucket of white paint, and I'll buy dye, colored dye, and then I will mix different shades of blue or green or red so that I could have colored paint for different parts of our flat, because white paint was a lot cheaper than any other than the colored ones. So fast forward to us having our children, and I worked as a medical sales rep at the time with a pharmaceutical company. And when I contacted my company to say, you know, although I'm due to come back after maternity leave, I'm not ready. I don't want to go full time. I want to work part time. They refused, and they said it had to be full time. But I remember that at the time the email came back from them, I happened to be reading a book by a lady called Elizabeth Elliot, and someone had written in asking, how do I know what my gift is? And she replied and said, your gift is that thing you do so effortlessly that everyone thinks it's such a big deal except you. And for me, that was interior design, because everybody loved my home. Everyone loved the fact that I designed my home nicely. They love the colors, they love the cushions and all of that. So my husband said, why don't you just do what you really love? And I snapped at him. I said, but I don't know what I love. I don't know what I like doing. Anyway, in the end, I was like, you know, everyone loved my home, so interior design. I enrolled in a couple of design courses, set up an interior design firm, and not long after that, someone says interior design. Not long after that, he came back from work one day and said, hey, why don't we move to the United States? And we said, like, okay, let's go. So we sold our home and off we went to the US. And in the process of our move, I purchased a baby furniture store. That was not out of a desire for baby furniture. That was just our route to emigrate into the country. So we were running the business. It was doing amazingly well. Life was absolutely perfect. Then the recession hit. I'm giving you the abridged version here again, but the recession hit, and I began to watch the sales drop, and it was becoming imminent that the store was we were going to lose the business. So it was a physical shop in an affluent high street in Atlanta. I also had hired a web designer to help us design a really good e-commerce website, because e-commerce was new-ish at the time. This was 2008. It was known in certain circles, but not widely known as it is today. And I wanted an e-commerce website because one of my competitors, who sold exactly the same products as I did, had only an e-commerce website. They didn't have a shop, and having a physical shop was always an advantage over those who were website only. And they said they had the shop, and they sold their company for $6 million. And I thought, I want to be able to sell for $6 million. At the end of the day, all they did was have a website, so I too can have a website. So I guess my first lesson would be that you don't take instructions from your outside, you take it from your inside. We're made up of spirit, soul, and body. As you know, as Christians, your spirit is the part of you, it's the living part of you that's connected to God. That is also the part of you that was created first, and that is also the most superior part of you. But you also have a soul, and your soul is what I like to call the container for your mind, because in your soul is where you experience emotions. That's where your memories are stored. That's where your will is engaged. That's where you have desires. It all happens within your soul. And then, of course, we've got our body, which is the physical side of us, our physical being, our senses rule our body. And the route in which information comes to us is that God feeds our spirit with information, either through his word or through the Holy Spirit. And so our spirit receives this information and feeds it to the mind. Then the mind processes it. So if you, for example, you have a sudden you imagine yourself, you think about yourself, you think about the future, and you think, you know what, I want to go into the food business. I think I'm going to be great. I love cooking, and I just see myself in the kitchen. I can see myself in a commercial kitchen, cooking in bulk and selling it and what have you. So that picture, let's say, came from your spirit. And what your mind then has to do when your spirit feeds it into your mind, when you become aware or conscious of it, is that your mind has to process that information so that it becomes processes it into a usable form for the body to actually take action with. So in your mind is where you begin the planning process. Okay, I need to get a kitchen, and this is where I'm going to have it. I'm going to have it in Lekki or in Omole or what have you, and I think these are the number of clients I'm going to have, and this is the particular type of food I'm going to cook, and this is what it's going to look like, and this is how I'm going to brand it. All of that is happening in the mind. And then when you actually now take action, then that's when your body gets to work. That's when you physically pick up the phone, and then you call the branding guy, and you call the landlord and see if you can get a location, and you go shopping. So that is the correct order of things, and that's how we get things done. But remember that we live in a fallen world, and our physical body, our flesh, has desires of its own. That's why the Bible says that the flesh is an enmity against God, because its desire and plan is very different from the one that your spirit is feeding your mind. But guess what happens? Your senses are pulling in information from the world, because your body is one with the world. So your senses are pulling in information from outside, from the world, and feeding it into your mind as well. So now you have a conflict. You have information from God, and you have information from the world, and it's now a battle between what do you do, and that's often why when we feel confused. Or for example, you know that God has told you and equipped you to do to let's stick with the cooking thing. I love food. You know that God has equipped you to do the cooking, to start a food business, and he said to you, hey, why don't you call this number or call this person, and they're going to help you because they have a location that you can use. And then you call the person, and the person says, no, I'm sorry, it's gone. So that's a conflict. But the fact that the person said it's gone does not negate what God had told you. But what we tend to do is accept what the person told us. So like, well, I tried and they said no. And this is what leads to us being frustrated and very often quitting. So I knew that I was on the right path, and I had purchased this business and everything was going well. But go and starting having a website was great, was a brilliant idea, nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But it was when my inspiration began to come from a competitor as opposed to it coming from God or coming from my spirit, then that became a problem. So I hired this web designer, and he basically tanked the whole thing. It didn't work, and he charged a lot of money for it, and I lost a lot of money. And around that time, the recession started to creep in. People began to, the shops around us slowly started to shutter. And I had a friend whose husband worked on Wall Street, and she said to me, listen, there's a rumor that next year is going to be tough for retailers. So no one knew at the time that the Great Recession was coming. Long story short, we had to close the business and we had to move back to England. So that was very disappointing because we came back empty-handed, and I also came back pregnant with my fourth son. And so we came back, and my friend Susie opened her home up to us, told us to come straight from the airport to her house. By the time we got there, she'd converted her dining room into a large bedroom for us, and she just really took care of and looked after us. And again, this is where the people in your life matter so much. I'm not saying that we build relationships because of what we can get out of it, but people, and the interesting thing about my friend is that she wasn't, at the time we left, we had friends that we were closer to than we were to her, to Susie. But then when we came back, she was the one who opened her home to us. So you don't judge relationship based on I guess proximity, for starters, and you don't judge relationship based on how much time you spend with people. I'm sure you all have friends that you don't see all the time, but when you do see them, you really do catch up, and it's like it never happened. I have another friend in the US bookie. She and I speak maybe 2 or 3 times a year, but we're as tight as can be. Like, we're really, really close. So it was also learning. That was a very interesting lesson for me to learn. So anyway, we come back, and the guy in the TED Talk, I call him Peter because I don't want him to sue me. His name was actually Patrick, because, you know, the Americans sue everyone. So his name was Patrick, and Patrick created a beautiful website that was broken. It just didn't work, and we fell out rather acrimoniously. So now I've shut the shop. I'm back in the UK with a big belly. I'm practically homeless, living with my friend, and I'm thinking. And what I had said to the landlord was that we were going to move online in 30 days, and that's what we told our customers, and we told everyone, hey, we're moving online. We're just simply we're having a moving sale. We're changing location. So I had 30 days to build a website. I had given him my notice to the landlord because luckily the lease had also come to an end at the time, or should I say not luck? It was God. So I then realized that I had no option. So I called a friend of mine who, in Nigeria, and I said, listen, I need a website. I need you to help me. He passes me over to his friend. His friend names his fee. I couldn't afford it. I couldn't even afford, if he had said to me £10, I would not have been able to pay £10 for a website. I wouldn't have been able to pay anything because every penny we had to go towards baby items and feeding the kids and everything. So spending £10 on the website was ridiculous for me then. I couldn't even afford it. I was looking for someone to do it for me for free, and I couldn't get anyone. So when I got off the phone from his friend, my friend's friend, I thought about him, and I thought about the web designers that we had gone through over the years, and the one who built the website that looks really good and didn't work, and realized that they all had the same thing in common, which was they were capable. They were not born with the capability of building a website. They had to learn. And here I am, I'm pregnant. I have nothing else to do but look after the kids. I might as well learn. So I go onto Google and I search how to build a website, and learned different things about the components. That it's very, very similar to the spirit, soul, and body. Is that you have the front end of the website, which is where the visitors see. When you go onto a website and you see it, that's the front end. Then you have the back end, which is where all the products are loaded on, and that's where all the content and the text and everything is put on there, and that's the back end. And then you have the core of it, if you like, which some people might call it the CMS or the container. But you also had had to have back in the day, you needed to have a processor for processing the payments, and you had to have a connector to connect the payment to your bank. And it was just such a whole production just to have a website in those days. And so I learned about all these different components and saw how they could all come together. And I ended up spending $75, and I had the website up and running, and it was up and running in 26 or 28 days. So that was done. But then I also now needed to have the website rank on Google, and that was the science of search engine optimization. And I got a really lovely guy to teach me how to do it, and for a small fee, and I did it myself. So now the story starts to get a little bit interesting, because at this point, I now had a great website. The products looked amazing. I had gone to the European Union to source furniture and interiors, and I also had my US suppliers, and I had everyone on the website. And I also then built a second website for the UK. So I had two. I had one US and I had one for the UK. The UK at the time had absolutely nothing like what we sold in the US, so it was a talking point for the press by the time we started doing the PR, because they were like, who will spend that amount of money on a cut? And so we got a lot of press because of that. But I, on the other hand, wasn't comfortable with how it all came together, because I'm selling luxury items, I'm selling really expensive nursery furniture, but then I'm broke. And that was a problem for me. I didn't also like the fact that I had lost my business in the US. I didn't like the fact that I had to move in with a friend. I didn't like the story was not attractive to me. And because of that, I shied away from talking about it to people. So I would go for networking events and avoid answering when they say, so how did you get into it? Because it's quite a niche market. It's not like I was selling clothes or makeup. It's like baby furniture to affluent people. It was very, very specific. And people obviously were making the assumption that I grew up sleeping on an Armani bed or something like that, which was far from the truth. So I wasn't comfortable with it until I came across an article in a magazine where someone had written two different stories about one woman. The first one said, meet Mary. She graduated from one of the top universities in the country. On the day she graduated, she landed a job in one of the top law firms in the country. She was there for a year, and then a well-known publishing house scooped her up, and she worked there for 2 years, and then she went on, moved across town to go write her book. Her new book will be out next spring, and she's also now running her own business. And the second story said, meet Mary. Mary went to a school and just about scraped through with a third class. On the day she graduated, she ran into her father's friend, who gave her a job as a cleaner in his office. She worked there for about a year and was made redundant, and her friend helped to get her into her own company, and where she worked as a clerk. And then she was made redundant, and she had to move across town to live with her auntie, because now she was homeless. And she's trying her hand at running a business and hopes to write a book one day. And the article ended with, which of these two stories do you prefer? And obviously the obvious one is the first version. And she named the first version the rockstar story, and the second version the sub story. It's the same story of the same woman covering the same time period, but it was really just about how the story was told. So I decided that I was going to write decided that I was going to rewrite my story, and I was going to write the rockstar version. So I pulled out all of the highlights of my journey, but then I wanted it to be authentic as well. And I couldn't run away from the fact that I lost a business. So I put it in there, and I called it my rockstar story, but it was an authentic narration of my life. And when I was done and I had a look at that piece of paper, I thought, whoever this woman is, I want to be her, because I felt so elated. So my first assignment for you ladies is rewrite your story. You've got to do it. It doesn't matter how great you've had it. There is something powerful when you write about yourself, or when you write about yourself the way your spirit sees you, not the way your flesh sees you. Okay, there's a difference, because when you pull out the paper and you start writing, and you're writing from your spirit, you are writing how God sees you. You're writing, you're not condemning yourself. There is no shame. There is no embarrassment at loss. Whatever it is you've been through, whether it's a divorce or broken relationships or financial upheaval or health challenges. No matter what it is, all of it comes under the blood of Jesus, and all of it is beautiful because God works all things out for his good. Because what happens in the world is that they want us to hide the things that are shameful. Sister Fumi mentioned about the TED talk that I did, and that it was released 6 days ago. And in the last 6 days, I have received so many messages from people. Some people I've never met in my life, never spoken to them. And everyone is sharing their own challenges, not even their challenges. They're telling me their stories that they've never told anyone, and things that they felt was shameful, because the world we live in today tells us that if you're not winning, you have something to be ashamed of. And the world tells us that if you fail, that's a negative thing. But all things really do work out for our good. And where there is failure and where there is loss and difficulty and challenges, as a child of God, God is also present there. When we talk about David and Goliath, we focus so much on the fact that Goliath was killed, but we forget that David was a small boy who was looked down on by his family. And we don't see David the way that he may have seen himself. I don't know how he saw himself when he was young, but over time, spending time in the presence of God, he must have eventually started to see himself the way God saw him, because he just learned to rely on God. One of the things that I discovered as well on my journey is that when you have been through a period of shame, or you have something that you are embarrassed about, you layer your soul with thought processes and beliefs that adorn and cover what you're hiding, what you're ashamed of. And the thing about negative thoughts is that having a negative thought layered by an affirmation or positive words is just like dressing up a wound without treating the wound. The mind is the engine room of your life. That's what I had said earlier. And that's where any changes that needs to happen in your life has got to begin in the mind, because your mind is neutral. Your mind actually doesn't have a preference between your spirit and the world. It doesn't have a preference between God and the world. It just sits there and it receives whatever you feed it with is what it acts on. It's what it ends up processing. So I read the story and I rewrote my story, and I was elated when I was done. I thought, this is amazing. I felt so good. And from that point on, every time I got discouraged, I'll pick up that piece of paper and I'll read it and I'll feel better, because what the paper was doing was telling me that this is who I really was. Not who I was when I was discouraged and crying, not who I was when I was ashamed and hiding and avoiding networking meetings because I didn't like my story. But this person here, this is really who I was. I had no intention of telling the story. I wrote it just so I could feel better, and I felt better. But one day I came across an advert for a charity event. I had created a vision board, which is second assignment for you guys. If you've never done a vision board before, you definitely have to do that. My vision board, I saw it, I must have read about it somewhere, and I thought, hey, I'm going to create one of that. And what it is, if you don't know, is that it's a pictorial representation of your life, the life that you see yourself living, not the life that you have now, but the life you desire to have. Again, this is the pictures that you're going to pull out from your spirit, and you're going to put, and there is nothing like it's too big. The important thing, though, is that your inspiration has to come from inside and not from the world. You're not going to be inspired by your neighbor because they drive a Bentley or they live in a mansion, and you also want to live in a mansion. You have to get quiet, and you have to pull yourself away from the noise of life and find out what's actually inside your spirit, and then pull it out and put it in picture form. So I done my vision board, and on that board I had an expensive dress on there, because my friend at the time was a fashion designer, and she had designed this range of absolutely stunning dresses, but they were so expensive. But the point was not to wear her dress per se, but I just wanted to be able to afford to wear whatever I wanted to wear. I wanted the day to come when I could wear whatever it is I wanted to wear. And then I also had on there my dream home, and I had on my dream car at the time, which is obsolete now because that billboard, that vision board is so old. I had on there TED because I thought I wanted to be a speaker and I want to speak at TED one day. And I had on there a woman speaking, like public speaking, because I wanted to do public speaking. I also had on there a physical shop because I really wanted to have a shop again after I had lost it, and I wanted to be specific as to where the shop will be. So I went onto Google Images and I googled affluent shopping street London, and I found Kings Road, Chelsea. Okay, so I screenshot Kings Road at Chelsea and I put it on the board. I also had on there children in a classroom to say that they were I was mentoring them. I wanted to have a charity, and I wanted to help children to think differently, and I wanted to mentor young children. So I had all this, and I had a stack of books to represent that I was also going to be a writer, and I was going to publish a number of books. Now, remember that this vision board was created when I had absolutely nothing. It was created when I had now moved into a 2-bedroom flat. My husband and our son's baby had arrived by then, and we were, I mean, we were, it was sparse. The days that we had a little bit of money, our treat was buying value bread from M&S. So value bread is when they have like the different grades of bread in the supermarkets, and the value is usually the no frills one. It's like dirt cheap. The packaging is clear. There's no writing on the package, and it's supposed to be the cheapest and the poorest of the qualities. And for us, that was a treat for us, that we could have value bread and even have eggs. So things were really, really rough at the time, but I was able to travel into the future and see what was possible for me. I had no physical evidence that was going to happen. And I just had God's grace, and I just relied on God and truly believed that, but because the desire to have a better life never left me. And that's something that you've got to be careful about when you are in a difficult season and it's dragged on for long. You've got one of two choices, because what's happening is there is something called cognitive dissonance, and that is when there is a battle between what you're seeing in the physical and what you desire on the inside, or what you believe on the inside. So there is and your brain is constantly working to quell that dissonance, because the dissonance is uncomfortable. It's like this, like it's almost like your mind isn't at peace. One minute it's up, the next minute it's down, and it keeps going this way. And the job of the brain is to help you be at peace. So it's like, okay, let's agree. We're going to agree with one. We're not going to agree. We're not going to have two pictures. We're not going to have one desire in the heart and one outside. We're either going to bring our desire to align with what we can see on the outside, or we're going to bring our outside to align with what's going on in our hearts. So often we have the choice of agreeing with our circumstances because it's just dragged on for too long and we're fed up, or we decide we're going to disagree with the circumstance, and we're going to pull ourselves out of that circumstance so that we're in a place that reflects what's in our minds. I hope that's clear. So so I'd done this vision board, and I put it in a place where I could see it really clearly. I put it on my mantelpiece, and I would look at it regularly. And the interesting thing is, when I was done, even though my circumstances hadn't changed, I was so happy to see what my life could be. I was really happy to see the possibilities of what the possibilities that laid out there for me. And I'll stare at it and I'll imagine going into that dream home or driving that car. I wanted to be able to simply ask, say I'm hungry, and then go for a meal. I wanted to just go for a meal at anywhere, anytime I wanted to. I'm looking for, well, someone's raised a hand. Should I answer that for me? I'm not sure if that's a question.
I think the person is more like acknowledging what you're saying.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Okay, forgive me. Okay, so please keep raising. It's fine. I just wanted to be sure because we didn't discuss that previously. So I So I done the board, and the interesting thing is when I looked at it, I thought, this is my life, because I put everything I could imagine. I included my children, a family picture of my husband and kids, because I imagined that we will grow together as a family on there. And I thought, this is my life. As a matter of fact, anything that's not on this board, I have no business doing it. And that's what a vision board does for you, is that it helps you to consolidate the life that you should be having, so that all the other distractions don't have a chance at stealing your attention. There will always be that opportunity for you to be distracted, for you to look at. But if you can create a vision board, think about every area of your life and put it on there. Put on your ideal physique. If you're overweight and you're like, you know what, I don't want to be overweight anymore, I want to be trim and fit, then it needs to go on there. If you've got a temper, then you need to put on there that I'm calm and even tempered. You can put, I didn't put affirmations on mine, but you can put things that God says about you on your board as well. What do you want to see for yourself? When you think about, and there's another exercise that I also do, and I recommend in my courses. I run a few mindset courses, and that's vision writing. Very similar to a vision board, but what you do with vision writing is you describe a day in your life. It is the most powerful tool I can recommend, especially when you're going through a tough time, or when you're dealing with doubt or discouragement. Write a day in your life, and this is how you do it. Today is the 26th of January, 2026. I woke up this morning at 5 and switched off my alarm, and here I am. I've come downstairs now to have my coffee. On my way down, I put on my candle. Oh, I love the smell of this coffee and vanilla fragrance that's filling up the house. I've just put on the music to so that my family wakes up to worship music when they finally get up. And I'm so happy to be sitting on this lovely chair overlooking my garden. Literally describe everything. Describe your day, describe your appointments, describe what it looks like. If you're a writer and you've pictured yourself in the media, then you say, oh, I've got an appointment this morning with Channels TV because they're going to be interviewing me, and then after that I've got to shoot over to the school because I'm doing a talk there on whatever, and then I've got an appointment with my fabricators in Switzerland. And just write a day in your life. I'll give you an example of when I needed to do this. My son suddenly fell very sick overnight, and we were in hospital, and it was very, very close. He ended up being placed in a coma. The doctors were unsure whether he was going to make it, and it was purely a miracle that he survived and was fine. But 2 weeks later, he started coughing again. What landed us in the hospital in the first instance was a cough, and that just got worse, and he couldn't breathe. So now 2 weeks later, we're back in the A&E because he started coughing again. And this time the enemy was doing a number on my mind, and I began worrying, what if his lungs are still not strong enough after the last ordeal? He was on a breathing machine only 2 weeks ago. What if his lungs can't handle it? What if this time he doesn't make it? And I always had most of the time I have a notebook. Back then I always had a notebook and a pen with me in my bag. And the Holy Spirit instantly told me to pick up that pen. The Holy Spirit told me instantly to pick up pen and paper.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yes. Pick up a pen and paper and write a day in his life. So I write, the date is 2019. This happened in 2012. The date is 2019. Reese has just come back from playing football. He's all sweaty and messy because I chose, he plays American football, and I chose football because that was the most strenuous thing I could imagine, that the strain that would happen, that would occur in his lungs. And I just wanted to picture him doing the most extreme of things and still being okay. And I described him playing football, that he's just come in, he's muddy and sweaty, he's gone to have a shower, and then I added, I remember that day when I was sitting in the emergency room, worried if this day will come. Now look at us, 5 years later, he is perfectly well. And I wrote down, I started praising God in there. Instantly the fear disappeared, the thoughts, everything went, and we were fine, and he is still fine. Praise Jesus. So right, having a clear vision of your future is powerful, because your future lies in the invisible realm, which is the spiritual realm. Your future does not lie here today. So your future can only be your future can only be gotten a hold of by your spirit. It is highly unlikely, and if I saw you or anyone doing it, I'll get a bit worried, that I get up in the morning and I start acting physically. What's a good example? I act, let's say that I've pictured my dream home, and I wake up in the morning and I start freaking out saying, why am I in this small place? What's going on? I should be in my dream home. Because the future, the dream home is not here in the physical realm, it's in the causal realm. And the spiritual realm is the causal realm, because that's what causes all things to happen. Everything we're experiencing here in the physical realm, this is all past tense and expired. It's done, because it was created by something in the spirit realm. So whatever it is you're creating today started off as in the invisible realm. It didn't start here. What we're dealing with here is the result of something that we thought about and then we did. So this is actually an outcome life that we're living. We're not creating anything by our actions. As a matter of fact, when your focus is so much on the physical, all you're doing is you're shifting things around. You're just moving things around, and you're changing perspectives, and you're looking, and things, you're like, oh, I did this. No, you didn't do that. The only way you can change anything is by starting in your mind, is by changing your thoughts. And how do you change your thoughts? You decide where your thoughts are going to be fed from. Is it going to be fed from your spirit, or is it going to be fed from the world? If you're one of those who sits down consuming the news of the world, then most of your thoughts are coming from the world. And yes, some of your decisions might look wonderful, but you're shortchanging yourself, because there is something, you have access to something more powerful than what the world has, and you're just ignoring it, and you're allowing expired material, other people's opinions to drive your life, because that's what's actually happening. So I do the vision board, and I'm really excited. And then I had this, on there was, because I wanted to support a charity. The minute I did it, I came across an advert for a charity tea, which was called Gele Tea. And I was like, oh, Gele, and I didn't know Nigerians did charity teas. It was in aid of Alzheimer's disease. So I went on to book, I wanted to get a ticket to attend, but they had forgotten to put their contact details on there. So I went on Twitter and I tweeted them. So the Twitter handle, I tweeted them and they replied. And then when they replied, because I didn't have a personal Twitter at the time, it was just a business, and she'd gone and she saw the website, and she sent a message back, oh, this is amazing. Well, I'd love to interview you. She turned out to be an editor for a newspaper, for a national newspaper. So she goes, I would love to interview you. And I was like, sure, come, let's meet up. So we meet up, we have coffee, and I'm talking to her about the products. And bear in mind that we had already by this time already started to have the press featuring some of my business products. And so it wasn't, anyway, she said she'll feature, and I'm like, fine. So she comes, we had a meeting. And as she stood up and started buttoning her coat to leave, she said, how did you even get into this business? And without meaning to, my rock star story literally tumbles out of my mouth, because I had read it so much that I had memorized it. I didn't plan to tell her that. I just had, like I said, rewrote the story for my own use, not to tell people, but because I'd read it so often, it came out of my mouth. And she just sat back down and picked up her phone and said, I've got to make a phone call. And she calls her editor and she says, we have a story. It's a good one and we must run it. And the story that I was so ashamed of and I was hiding was published in a newspaper, in a national newspaper. They did a full page spread, and then they featured my products, and the following week they did another feature. And somebody, I believe, must have read that article and nominated me for a Retailer of the Year award. So I go for the award ceremony maybe a month or so later. And while I was there, everyone was asking, how did you get into luxury baby furniture? And I just kept telling them my rock star story. That's all I had. And that's all I kept telling them. And in that day, I got a few invitations to speak at some private events and also to join a charity, get this, that mentors children in school. I remember the two ladies were standing next to each other and I told them the story and they just looked at each other and said, she'll be great for the charity. I'm like, what's your charity? And she says, oh, we'll email you. And it turns out to be a charity that goes into inner city schools in London, because the inner city schools have a lot of Black children that don't have access to Black role models because they don't show us on television. So all they see that the prime minister is white, well, now Indian, the governors, the ministers, and everybody's white, and all the doctors are white. I mean, things are changing now, but the idea is to take successful or accomplished Black people into the schools so that these children who don't get to see them on television can actually see that you can be a pilot and you can be a doctor and so on. So I joined the charity, and that was within about 2 to 3 months of me creating the vision board. And that was the first thing that came to light. And what that did for me was really encourage me that everything else will definitely happen. So when you have a vision board, you want to keep it in front of you and constantly look at it and constantly thank God that it's already done, because your vision board, though you created it using your physical hands, the pictures are a representation of something that actually already exists in your future. I believe that we are incapable of imagining the impossible. When your spirit feeds your imagination with a picture, it is only because the picture already exists, not that it's going to exist. Your imagination doesn't create things. Your imagination captures reality, spiritual realities, and passes it to your mind. And so that was what happened. And so I did that. And then fast forward a few years, I then began to, the business slowly started to grow and started to, slowly improve and so on. And I got an invitation. I remember one day I was just, at work, and this email comes up, which I thought was a scam, and I just trashed it. And then a few days later, I got a call, and it was from the Prime Minister's office, not the current one. This was Dave Cameron years ago. And it was a Prime Minister's office, and they said, we invited you over for cocktails, and we haven't got your RSVP. I'm like, I didn't get it. I didn't get any invitation. Well, we sent it to you. Anyway, they sent it, and sure enough, there was an invitation. And it only happened because someone heard my story. And then I knew that I wanted to expand. I was having trouble growing the business. I had grown it to a point where I felt I couldn't do it anymore. And I began praying. Sister Fumi, you have to tell me when to stop, because again, I don't remember how long I'm supposed to be speaking
Okay,
for. Just
you have like 15 more minutes. So
okay, brilliant. That's fine. So I prayed for a mentor. I said, Lord, I really need a mentor, because at this point I don't know what more to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to carry on. And I got one of the ways in which I thought I'm going to try and grow the business is to go and do, by this time, bear in mind, we were an online store only, and nobody knew about us. So I thought, I'm going to go to shops of baby clothing stores, and I'm going to speak to the owner and say, can I come and do a talk on how to design your nursery to your customers? And hopefully they'll either hire me as an interior designer, or they will buy the furniture that I have on my website. So I go to this, I just Google baby shops London, and I go to this shop. I didn't even think about the address. I just knew that it was outside the station, not far from the station. And it was only when I got there I realized that I was on King's Road, and I thought, this is what I have on my vision board. Because when I put it on the vision board, I wasn't really searching for King's Road, Chelsea. I just wanted a pictorial representation of an affluent street. And when I went on Google Images, that's what I saw. So I take I go into the shop and I speak to them, and the owner wasn't there. So I come back out. I'm like, wow, this is King's Road. Okay, let me walk down. So I start walking down, and I came across a shop. I found myself in front of a shop. It's a clothing store called Reese Clothing. I had zero interest in that company. I mean, they were way above my budget anyway. I'd never really looked at them before, but I just found myself standing and staring at this sign, their signage, and I couldn't take, and I knew that it was a spiritual experience, but I couldn't make sense of it. So I just stood and like, okay, whatever God is doing, I don't know. I was rebranding the website at the time. So I thought maybe the Lord was saying, look at their fonts, look at how they've done their sign, look at anyway. So I go home, seemingly not achieving anything that day. And then I get a text. By the time I got home that evening, I got a text from a guy that I had met at a networking event, maybe some 3 or 4 years earlier. When I first met this man, he would text me, send me a WhatsApp message every single week, inviting me to networking meetings. I wasn't interested. And he'll say, I'd like to invite you, to the point where I stopped opening the messages. So I got a text from him that evening, and I realized I hadn't actually heard from him in 2 whole years. I open the text and it says, Dear Toks, I'd like to invite you to a networking event in the home of and alongside the founder of Reese Clothing. So Reese is a chain. It's a successful chain of clothing brands. I thought, wow, okay, clearly I have to go. So 2 weeks later, I go for the networking event. And I meet this guy who opens the door, very sweet man, lets me in. There were only about 8 or 9 of us. So I quickly Google who the founder is so that I can recognize him, because we're all now doing introductions and everyone's saying their name. And I see that the founder is a guy called David Reese, and there is nobody says their name is David. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So, but then there was this guy who was very, very well versed on the retail landscape in the UK, older gentleman, and he was just talking. He had so much knowledge about policies and, you know, regulations and finances and everything. So I thought, I go up to him, and I had some red wine that day. And I always say, I'm not sure if it was the red wine or the Holy Spirit, but I had a boldness to go up to him, which was totally out of character for me. Normally I'll sneak into these meetings and I'll sneak right out. I go up to him and I say, I need a business mentor and I want it to be you. And he laughed and he gave me his card and said, hey, call me or text me, email me. So I go home to email him and I Google his name, and I find that he is the CEO of some well-known brands, former CEO of a number of well-known brands, including Hugo Boss. So I'm like, okay, wow. And then he starts to mentor me. And he decides not to charge me. He says, just buy me coffee. Every time we met, just buy me coffee. So one day, I also mentor people in business, and I had been speaking to my mentee, and at the end of our meeting, I was very excited about what we had discussed, and I was excited about what I knew she was going to produce with what we had discussed. But then I was also going to my mentoring meeting with my mentor, and I thought, hold on a second, this guy has been mentoring me for like however many months, and there's no change, there's no growth in the business, sales haven't increased, nothing has changed. And so I knew it couldn't be him, because he was kosher. He was I mean, he's headed some household brands, so he knew his stuff, and he wasn't holding back. He was very generous, kind-hearted man, an Englishman too. So I knew it wasn't him, so it had to be me. So I now said, okay, Toks, let's be honest. What's going on in those meetings? By this time, the Lord has started to teach me certain principles, which is what I really wanted to talk to you about. But obviously he's led me in a different direction to just tell the story. But he has started to teach me certain principles like authenticity and alignment and so much. And one of them, authenticity, was really the beginning of it all for me. And that is when you agree to live your life the way God created you to live it. This is when you decide that you're going to live as Ifoma. You're not going to live as Ifoma, the usher in church, or you're not going to live as Ifoma as your pastor or pastor's wife described you. You're going to be you. You're going to live the way God created you to be. And that's rather uncomfortable, because there is safety in numbers. We prefer to do what other people are doing. We prefer to be in agreement with what everybody else is doing. We prefer to have the same views and mindsets as other people. When people say certain things are wrong, you want to be able to say, yes, I agree is wrong. We don't like being contrarian in our views. But authenticity invites you to be who God made you to be and not feel bad about who you are. So I had started to practice that, and another principle that he taught me was introspection, which is going into your mind to find out what's going on in there, because what you say and what you're thinking are two very different things. You, it's a practice that every woman really should do every single day. Even if all you ask yourself at the end of each day or at the start of each day is the question, why? Why did I say what I said to that woman? Why did I do what I did? And even deeper, why did I feel a certain way when someone asked me this particular question? And that practice of introspection and authenticity combined strips away the layers that are covering the floor of your mind. Your mind is where thoughts are formed. If you have challenging childhood and difficult marriages and you have all of these things, what they do over time, I think the going word for it now is probably trauma, but what it does over time is that it layers your mind. And that is where your thoughts start to grow from. Your thoughts don't grow from the soil of your mind anymore. They grow from the layers that you are using to protect yourself. So now I'm asking myself, what's going on in these meetings? And you know what I discovered? I found out that when I was with him, this giant of a man, he's not a physical giant, but in the retail world, he's a giant. The location where we were meeting was a 5-star grand hotel in Kensington, very close to where William and Kate lived, at the time. And all of that stuff together made me feel very small and inadequate. And so my goal in those meetings went from growing my business to feeling whole and feeling better about myself. And that's what introspection does, is that it digs out the root cause of your thoughts, which if anybody had asked me that morning when I was going for that meeting, hey, why are you going for a mentoring meeting? I will say to them, oh, because I want to grow my business. And guess what? If you had looked inside my mind, you will see that I truly wanted to grow my business. But the driving thought, the intention behind every word I spoke and my action and my reaction, everything, the intention was really to feel whole and complete. I didn't like the feeling of smallness. We could say there was some pride there, there's ego, but whatever it was, I didn't like that feeling. And so it now became about feeling better. And I guarantee you that when you start to be more introspective and you start to ask yourself honest questions and you begin to authentically answer every question, you will discover things that you never even knew existed in your mind. It will shock you, but it's so liberating. It's so liberating when you start to live as yourself. And one way in which these layers get stripped away, unfortunately for us, is through challenges. If you're going through a challenging season, make sure that you say, you know what, I'm not coming out of it empty-handed. I'm gaining something from it. My friend Susie, I'm sure she's on the call and she won't mind me sharing this, but she went through an acrimonious divorce a couple of years ago. It was horrible. And the man refused to leave the house. He stayed in the house with her, and she's going through this horrible, horrible divorce that just seems to drag on because he didn't want to leave. And I remember saying to her, she actually said that she wanted to do a course in a Chartered Institute of Housing course, which is a very tough, mentally tasking, demanding professional course. And I said to her, well, you're going through a divorce. Maybe rather than do the course, you really should be looking after yourself. And she said something that I'll never forget. She said, I am going to go, this divorce is going to last, I think she said 1 year at least. At the end of 1 year, I don't want to come out empty-handed. I know I'm already losing a lot. Financially, I'm losing out, but I want to say that at the end of 1 year, I got something out of it. And that just really, really changed my thinking. So when we go through a trial, it doesn't have to be that you get a course out of it, or, it could just simply be that you get a life lesson out of it, a life lesson that becomes a principle for you to live your life by. And so that was, so when was the minute I admitted that I was being egotistical and small and everything, because how that affected my thinking, how it had now affected the meetings was, because I was trying to feel bigger, when he says, so how's your week been? How's the month been? I started telling him about all the celebrity clients I had and how this went well and that. I mean, they were grand things to talk about, but in reality, I knew they were not making a massive difference on the business. It wasn't moving the needle. It was just, ego tripping, really. Yes, you have a celebrity client, but do you only have, is it just not the one guy that you have, or what has come out of it, So my conversations was always moving towards making Toks look good and big and tall. And he would say, well done, keep doing what you're doing. And if I was doing what I was doing, then I kept getting what I was getting. So that was the minute I admitted to myself that what I was doing was self-sabotage. I stopped and things began to change and things began to improve. It would be another few years later when and my time is almost up. I'm going to try and squeeze in 2 testimonies in there. It would be another few years later when I was designing a nursery not far from in the Kensington area, and I was driving that particular day. I'd been going by public transport, but that particular day I decided to drive. And as I was driving, I thought, oh my gosh, this is King's Road. This is that King's Road that's on my vision board. By this time, my board had, the glue behind the board had come off and the board had fallen onto the mantelpiece in my room, and all my creams and everything was covering most of it, but King's Road was still there. You could still see it. I'd now had this board for at least 7 years or so, maybe not quite, maybe 5 years. I think 5 years. I'd had the board for almost 5 years. And I thought, this is King's Road. I'm going to drive down. So I start driving down and I see a shop, 2 shops to let. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. I wonder how much it is. I wonder how much the shop rent is. So I take pictures of the number and everything, and I call the agent, and he says, yeah, why don't you go and view it? I'm like, oh, okay. So I call my mentor. I say, hey, I'm going to go see a shop. My intention was not to rent it. My intention was to play close enough to my dream so that it can start to feel real again. And who knows, one day I'll get there. We go there and he has a look at the shop, and we both go inside, and he says, this is perfect. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm not, this is perfect, and he's a much older guy. So I have to watch how I spoke to him. I thought, perfect, but for who? we're not ready. We're not serious. This is just, we're playing here. He had also written a book, and he used me as a case study about mentoring in the book. And he brought me a copy, and he goes, hey, why don't you do a testimonial of the book? Just let's do a video testimonial. And I'm like, all right. So we go to the back of the shop, and I hold the book. That video testimonial is still hidden on YouTube somewhere. It's out there. And I hold the book, and I say, I start telling him, oh, this book is, Roland has been my mentor for X number of years, blah, 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 blah. Then he says, stop. And he's very animated. He goes, stop. Why don't we add at the end of the testimonial, and I'll be opening my shop in December? I went, I'm not going to open my shop. He goes, no, you will. You'll be able to. And I couldn't say no. So all that moment, all I kept doing was praying that nobody saw the video. And I was convincing myself, he's an old man. What does he know about social media? He won't know how to upload it. He won't know how to title it. No one's going to find it, and blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, I thought, but what if it goes out there and I disgrace my family name? And what if people start to say, so where is the shop you said you were opening? I thought it was December. And it was that drove me to put an offering into the shop when I had no money to do so. I think I had like £40 in my account at the time. I'll have to tell you on another day how I was able to get that done. But we've been on the King's Road in Chelsea now for 7 years, and there were, as I said, some principles I wanted to share. But you can listen on my podcast, Living Inside Out, and I share a lot of my journey on there, and on my blog as well. My website is toksaruoture.com, and you can link to the podcast there as well. Thank you guys so very much for listening.